Serious teachers of Reddit. What is the surprisingly smartest thing your stupidest student has ever said? When I was teaching grade 5 a few years back, I had a student who really struggled academically and misbehaved a lot. During one of his punishments, which was washing dishes with me from our morning breakfast time, I straight up asked him why he kept getting into trouble. The boy admitting that he just knew that if he misbehaved he would get to spend time with me one-on-one, and we would talk about life and his hobbies and such. I found out later on that his father had been incarcerated for pretty much the entirety of the boy's life. So, the stupidest and most misbehaved kid in the class was actually just playing the system the whole time and really just needed a positive male role model in his life. After that, I told him he didn't need to act up in order to spend time with me. He could just ask for extra responsibility and I would give it to him. He was, mostly, better behaved after that. I miss him a lot. Edit. I'm absolutely flabbergasted by the response to this post. I didn't think anyone would see it. I appreciate you all. All I can say is, spend some time to talk to someone in need. I'm teaching English as a foreign language, and one of my students hasn't been attending for a year. When he finally came, I gave him an essay to write. He wrote it in perfect German, because he thought that we were studying German. The guy had been learning German all year long only to learn that we were studying English. This is both the smartest and the stupidest thing I can imagine. I don't know if this counts, but I was teaching a public speaking class. It was mostly 9th grade. They were all nervous about their first big speech, and I tried to ease their nerves by saying, I promise giving a speech won't kill you. Then, some kid shouted, do you know how many people in history have died while giving a speech? Used to teach chess to elementary level kids. Would run chess camp over the summer. 20 to 40 kids come in every day for a full school day, but every period is basically a chess class. Lasts a week. On the first day, I would tell kids they need to lose to get better, which is true in a game like chess, especially in the beginning. I would tell them you have to lose 50 games before you can improve in chess. Well, on about day 3 I'm walking from the field to the class and see one of my students, 2nd grader, walking the other direction, and ask him offhand how's chess going, and he responds, well, I've lost all of my games, so I guess I'm doing great. In a college music history class, we were discussing the differences in sound between a harpsichord from the high baroque and today's grand piano. One student, who normally contributed little, said, the reason the two instruments sound so different is because harpsichord strings are plucked by quills, whereas piano strings are struck by hammers, and you'd make different sounds too if plucked or struck. Elementary school. I worked in the school admin office for a while. We had a cop come in to speak to the kids, basically to warn them on the dangers of strangers and random people speaking to them in the street. The cop was great and told the kids how they should always be careful and that some bad men might take them away from their mummies and daddies. One kid puts his hand up and asks the question, so what will happen if we go with one of these stranger men? The cop wasn't prepared for that question and just said how sad it would be and how his parents would miss him. A few days later a new buzzword was going around the school which phonetically sounded like pedophile. The kid had looked up online or spoke to someone and then told the other kids in schools about what pedophiles do. It scared the hell out of some of the kids and the principal had to come to each class to calm the kids down. Me, how do you know if something is alive? Them, if you can kill it. I have a student in my class with autism. He is very high functioning, but he is a couple years behind his grade level. We were discussing the American Revolution, and one of the vocab words we had was tyrannical leader. I jokingly told the class that if I was ever the leader of the country, that's the kind of leader I would be, and I went on to say that all of your teachers would be that way too. Most of the class looked at me blankly, but this one kid with autism understood what I was saying and looked at me, and while trying to contain his laughter says, well, that's because all teachers have a superiority complex. I just couldn't help but laugh in front of the class for the next 5 minutes. If you were an inch taller you'd be round. You just can't punish wordplay like that. I remember circumference because it sounds like circumcised. This kid isn't dumb, but most of the things he says are. just because he talks a lot and likes to argue. This kid goes to a private school which is open for 11 hours every day, even though the school day runs for 7 hours. If parents need to drop their kids off early or pick them up late, they have that option. He told me that he really wanted to get a dog, but his parents won't do it because there would be no one home to take care of the dog most of the time. The rest of the conversation went like this. Me, that makes sense. Puppies and dogs need lots of attention. It wouldn't be nice to leave them home alone all day. Kid, well, we could bring it to doggy daycare me every day. If someone is taking care of your dog for 8 hours every day, is that even your dog? Tim, well, that's what they do with kids. So real and so sad. That moment has stayed with me for a few years now. I don't wanna be done like my mama, teacher at an inner city school for a time where almost all the students had free breakfast and lunch, written about it before. Lots of the kids realized and knew they were in a no-win situation and a downward spiral in terms of education and situation in life. Quite a number of them tried their damnedest though to get out of it. Lots of times the kids don't know what is awaiting them at home. Many parents don't read to their kids or help them with homework. Many just can't because they themselves barely have an education or they are in just bad situations. One student came in and said their mama chose to pay the cable TV bill over the hot water bill, and another week they mom shot themselves in the hand with a gun she borrowed from some guy. Later the same mom chose to pay her cell phone bill over electricity, and that student had enough and decided to start studying and try to climb out. There is hope. I was on lunch duty one day and a middle school boy jokingly said, "Mr. Original Sanitizer, you wanna buy me an extra?" I replied with, "Do I look like your daddy?" He replied, straight-faced, "I don't know, you might. I ain't never met him." I bought him an extra. Edit, an extra is something extra to the basic school lunch, like an ice cream sandwich. I've mentioned this before. And also it is genuinely difficult to tell who is the stupidest. Kids are smart some days and clueless others. Some grow out of it. Anyway, we were talking about cheetahs being the fastest land mammal. Simona City kid swells up and says he can beat a cheetah in a race. The class laughs. Kid doesn't let it go. Finally he just says, "I can beat a fat cheetah in a race." I'm just thinking, maybe? I hate the word in describing this kiddo, and it wasn't so much what she said, but did. She certainly wasn't stupid, but as an at-risk youth counselor I can say she was very low functioning. She went AWOL one night out of the blue. Not one staff saw her leave. Usually when this happens, kids go do dumb kid stuff like going to a park to drink and smoke. Teenage shit. Well, we didn't see her for 2 days. We finally got a phone call from a person who had taken her in. 400 some miles away. When she got back to our facility she had this nervous look, knowing I was gonna scold her. I didn't. I was too fucking impressed. I asked her how she did it, and she said she kept hopping buses. I guess none of the drivers had the heart to kick her off, so there she went. I took a very big risk in the fact that I congratulated her on her journey. Her eyes lit up when I told her she had managed to travel farther than any kid that had ever gone AWOL. She never did it again and actually graduated the program with success. Still a budger, but I'll always remember that budger. I had a band-aid on my elbow, one of the big ones, and my student was trying to work out what it was. It was a drunken fall. I said ninjas had got me. He said it sounded like an injury. I laughed out loud, while in reality it was a ginjury. I don't understand what's going on in class, because you explain things so only the smart kids understand. He was absolutely right. I wasn't meeting my students on their level and building them up. I was immediately expecting them to be on my level, and that just wasn't realistic. 5 years ago, as a brand new teacher, this was an important thing for me to hear. It completely changed the way I planned lessons, and I'm a much better teacher now because of what he said. I still think back on that moment. Sometimes the students impact our lives just as much as we impact theirs and teach us important lessons. Edit, my first ever silver. Thanks so much. Edit 2, holy moly, platinum, thank you. I was making a joke about mermaids to a 6-year-old. If a mermaid is a person on top and a fish on the bottom, is a person on bottom fish on top a mermaid too? Or is it something else? Kid pauses and says, well no, it's not a mermaid, because if you have a fraction like 1/2 it's not the same as 2/1. I thought that was both the cleverest answer to that question I ever heard, but also made no sense. Mermaids aren't math. I ask that question to a lot of kids. That's by far my favorite answer. Some of my 5th graders were playing with a basketball in the hallway. I told them to stop. They did for a second, then continued. I said, guys, why do you keep bouncing that ball in the hallway? And one of them just looked at me and said, if you were 10 you'd do it too. I was like, yeah, I guess I would. Scout leader, doing first aid with some cubs. I ask one lad, how do you treat a burn? And he replies with respect. Hit that like button. If you don't, then you're a loser. For more added content, please subscribe to my channel and turn on post notifications.